All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our October Middle Mile Initiative Advisory Committee meeting. Great to have another strong attendance. Looks like close to 100 attendees once again. Really appreciate everyone's interest and engagement in this public process. Would love to get updates to everyone, to all the attendees, and then we will have a public comment period towards the end of this meeting to take any public comments and information that is provided to the advisory committee. So let's start off, do a roll call just to make sure we have enough of a member to get this meeting kicked off.
Okay, Ms. Tong.
Here.
Commissioner Guzman-Aceves.
Here.
Ms. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Benton, designee for Director Mishakin.
I'm here, but there. Go ahead.
Oh. Good morning, Director. How are you?
This meeting is very important. We're both here.
Ms. Richardson.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez.
Here.
Senator McGuire. Senator McGuire did indicate that he was traveling and he would try to call in if possible. Assemblymember Quirk Silva. Assemblymember Wood. We do have a quorum, so we're ready to go.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. Okay, so we have quite a packed agenda today. I know the staff have worked very hard to bring a lot of information items. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Scott Adams to go ahead and kick off the meeting today.
Thank you so much, Director Tong, and greetings, Middle Mile Advisory Committee members and public. It's again our pleasure to be here and give you our third update in the first 90 days that since this project began. Catherine, could you advance to the next slide, please? Real quick, just wanted to go through the agenda. Director Tong covered the first item on the opening comments. There will be my report, and then we will hear information items from a number of our key partners, beginning with the third-party administrator. Isaac Cabrera, our State Geographic Information Officer, will provide an update on our data and mapping efforts. We'll hear two updates from Roswell Osborne at the Public Utilities Commission on both the Middle Mile public comment process and a last mile programs update, given how important it is that the middle mile and the last mile are connected here. And then Caltrans will be giving an update on their district outreach. And then we will go to public comment, as Director Tong had said. So Catherine, next slide, please. As I mentioned, it'd been really just a short period of time that we've been in the project. So, 90 days total. So we wanted to report out to you in 30-day increments. So we'll provide just a brief update on the highlights of the last 30 days and then provide a look ahead at the next 30 days. Next slide, please. So these are the items that are, we feel, the most important to share with you all. And that is that the third-party administrator, their integration is now complete, and per statute, they are, assuming the leadership and the management and implementation of the Middle Mile Initiative. Another really important development has been that the Department of Technology has completed its interagency agreement with the California Public Utilities Commission. And so it really cements that partnership and the key roles that both of our entities play. The Public Utilities Commission, obviously, by statute is required to solicit stakeholder public comment on the proposed or the initial middle mile locations, and then working in collaboration with a third-party administrator, submit recommendations of those ultimate locations to the Department of Technology. So in the interagency agreement are the identification of some key milestones of transferring of information from the public comment stakeholder process, and also, some outlining of how we are going to continue to coordinate and collaborate together on last mile connectivity to the middle mile. As far as the work stream progress goes, data and mapping and design and engineering are so critical to this project. So a lot of the focus over the last 30 days has been continued work on both of those work streams. As I mentioned, Isaac Cabrera, the State Geographic Information Officer at the Department of Technology, is going to provide an update on that process, and design and engineering is going to be explained or updated in a couple ways from the third-party administrator and also from Caltra's perspective. As we have really stressed, and all of you know, that this project is being funded largely by federal dollars that have strict timelines. So want to let you know that we are working with our partners to provide the Department of Finance with the information they need for the next federal funding report that'll be due. And then I think something that's really exciting to all of us is that we have added some new team members, given the size and scale of this project, and really expanding our ability to wrap our arms around it and conduct the business that needs to get done. And so we're going to pause in a moment, not yet, but we wanted to introduce our newest colleague, Mark Monroe, who was recently appointed by the governor to be the Deputy Director of the Broadband Middle Mile Initiative. And then we will introduce the principal and senior project management from the Silicon Valley Consulting Group. They're a senior project management team that's been hired to help the Department of Technology manage our part of this enormous and historic effort. So without further ado, I would love to give a warm welcome to my colleague and friend, Mark Monroe, and have you, Mark, introduce yourself to the committee members and say a few words. I know you have a long history and intimate interaction with this project.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Mark Monroe, and I think we've all met in my previous capacity at the Department of Finance as part of this development of this important partnership between the administration, the PUC, and the legislature in developing the statutory and budgetary framework for this statewide open access broadband middle mile project. As some may know, I've spent the last 21 years at finance working in a range of policy areas, which have included utilities and transportation. And this past spring, we were able to capitalize on the governor's commitment to making broadband a priority, and the relationships built with the exceptional and committed individuals at CDT, PUC, and Caltrans to develop this new approach to solving for this important component of the digital divide. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with these teams, as well as the TPA in my new capacity, to get the state's open access middle mile network built, established, up and running, to bring affordable broadband service equitably to all Californian communities. And I'd just like to add to thank Director Tong, Scott Adams, the CDT team, as well as PUC and Caltrans, for their leadership and just the considerable amount of work they've done in moving this project to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I wanted to just take a moment and do a pause before our next introduction, to open it up to the committee members. And if any one of you wanted to send some congratulatory comment. I see Ms. Miller have her hand raised.
I'm hoping, thank you, Director Tong. I'm hoping that Teresa Calvert will join me on screen. So we obviously make up the Department of Finance team. And so this is very bittersweet for us, because Mark has been such a leader in this area, and we are thrilled that he will continue to work with really one of the best teams I've seen ever in state government, probably because Amy Tong is taking the lead. It's exceptional, but it's just such a pleasure to congratulate Mark and to get to work with him in this capacity. But it is certainly a loss to the Department of Finance, but luckily not to the state of California writ large. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa Calvert just to say a couple words. And as much as you can embarrass Mark, I really hope you will.
With this large of a crowd, I'll hold back from the embarrassing stuff. But we're just so excited to have Mark on the team and helping us here at Finance and just helping the larger effort. And this effort's very lucky to have Mark on the team. And so we're really excited for him and also this group. And sorry to see him go, but again, he's helping us immensely already in his new role. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right. Any other advisory committee member like to say? Yes, please.
Well, Mark, you don't have to tell us publicly, but I just wondered, was this an actual choice or a voluntold situation? No, I really want to thank you for taking on this role, and I'm very excited. I know you very much in your previous role as getting things done, and we have a lot to do here, so I'm very excited, and thank you for taking it on.
Thank you.
All right, any other committee members? All right, we will have more time to jump in later on. And I'd also want to take a moment to not only congratulate Mark, but I do want to take a moment to recognize Scott Adams, who has been wearing, how you say it, wearing two hats, carrying two duties until the appointment of Mark Monroe. And Scott, you have been just kind of jumping in without any hesitation, nothing that it was known to you when you first decided to join the state, but then, no question asked and has been doing an outstanding job. I think I'm pretty sure you are joining the rest of us. It's not only a sight of relief, but with a sight of excitement and just, energy behind that, knowing you have a new partner working with you side by side on this. And I know speaking from a little bit internal, Scott has quickly do a find and replace on all the tasks that was assigned to him to Mark's name after Mark was joined. So thank you so much, Scott, for continuing to carry this and would be a great partner to Mark moving forward.
Thank you, Director Tong. And yeah, Mark, glad to have you on board. So, in the spirit of warm welcomes, we wanted to also take some time to welcome Jay Sharma in the Silicon Valley Consulting Group, who has been retained to be the senior project management team for the Department of Technology on our side of the oversight of the project. So, Jay, I want to give you an opportunity to address the committee and just, give a brief introduction to your firm and the senior project manager.
Thank you so much, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. As Scott said, I'm Jay Sharma. I'm the founder of Silicon Valley Consulting Group. We are a state-certified micro business starting up organically within the system. And we are very thankful to Amy and Scott and the leadership from CDT and state to give us an opportunity. And we're looking forward to working with not only CDT, but working through different stakeholders in the game, CPAC, CDT, as well as TPA and Caltrans. Really excited about the project. We have put a very diverse team together. Our top leaders, both of the leaders have extensive broadband experience. And along with our journey, we're also bringing together our DVBE partner as a micro business. We want to set a right template for other companies to look at us, and we want to set an example. So fully excited for BNMI program, as well as making an example. So other companies like us come through the system and we can tell them this is what needs to be done as we move forward. So really, really thankful, excited. And I would like to introduce our senior project manager, Smriti, and she will take a moment to introduce herself as well. So thank you again. Smriti, go ahead.
experience, Scott. Apologize, my camera is not working. Sorry, something happened. This is Smriti Global. I'm senior project manager.
Hey, Smriti, I think you might be experiencing broadband challenge.
That's, yeah, she might be. So if she has having an issue, now I'll talk on her behalf. So let's give her 1 second. Smriti, can you? No, I think it's okay. No, it's okay. So just, I will speak on her behalf. So Smriti is the reason we are standing here with you guys, working with you. She brings more than 20 years of infrastructure broadband experience. Very recent, she spent 10 years working in Australia. You're rolling out broadband for entire country of Australia. You're getting 8 million households on priority basis to, with having equitable broadband. And she's excited, we're all excited, and we're looking forward to it. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jade. And Smriti, sorry that you can't come on camera. I know you're experiencing broadband issues. No, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, no worries, no worries. This is what we're here trying to fix. I want to open up to the committee member. Just want to say especially excited to see a micro business based in California are able to be selected for this historic project. So very, very excited about that. Any committee members want to chime in?
Well, it looks like Smriti might be in one of the high priority areas in California. Gotta make sure we get her on the map.
That's right.
Well, I was going to say, Director Tong, I think this is just, having both of you here now today is just another step forward on getting to this greater project management here. So thank you for joining the team.
Thank you. We're excited.
All right.
All right. Great. Catherine, could you please bring the slides back up and we'll conclude my presentation? Great. So could we go to the next slide, please? So with the introduction of Mark to the team and to the CDT family, as Director Tong had mentioned, we just really wanted to show a graphic that clearly outlines, both of our roles and how we interact with one another. Now that Mark is on board, he's going to take over the day-to-day oversight of the Broadband Middle Mile Initiative, and I will go back to doing my day job, which is working with the Broadband Council and working on the overall Broadband for All program. That's the implementation of the executive order and the broadband action plan. I think what's really important is that Mark and I have already established a great working partnership at a personal level, but we are going to be, on a daily basis, coordinating and collaborating to make sure that both efforts, Broadband for All and the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, are leveraged to support and augment each other. So it's not just the development of the middle mile, the statewide open access middle mile network, but through working with PUC and other partners on the last mile connectivity, and then the whole other part of the equation, which is broadband adoption, digital literacy, et cetera. Next slide. So in terms of the next 30 days ahead, going to continue going at warp speed, and that's really, having Mark assume and take the helm of the Middle Mile project, integrating and really, with this project, there is a very short timeline for integration, and it's having the Silicon Valley Leadership Group and Smriti jump in and start leading the project management side for the Department of Technology. We're very eager now that the CPUC has concluded their the middle mile public comment process, that as they go through and analyze and capture the pertinent information, start receiving information from them to inform both the middle mile locations and the map and future prioritization. Again, continued emphasis over the next 30 days on the data and mapping piece, the design and engineering, and working to identify pilot locations, which are early stage or early phase projects to really test out and learn information about how we roll out the constructed segments and any potential lease opportunities or leveraging dig once opportunities. And you'll hear more about that from the third-party administrator as they work to develop this pilot phase plan. So that concludes my presentation. Amy, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take some.
All right, thank you, Scott. I'm opening it up to the committee. I do wanted to acknowledge that Assembly Member Korsova is able to join. Thank you. Welcome. All right, any questions or comments from the committee member to this executive report up? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and move forward to the next portion of the agenda, which is a slew of information items briefing.
Thanks, Amy. I want to introduce Louis Fox, the CEO of the third-party administrator. He's going to say some words and then introduce a member of his team to provide an update on their approach to the project. Mr. Fox?
Hey, Louis, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Scott. Committee members, thank you for inviting us. I want you to know that it's an immense privilege for my team to be part of the most ambitious and comprehensive state broadband equity project in history. As CNIC, we've created and run 4 networks: a state network, a regional network, a national network, and an international network, all as a public benefit corporation. But I have to say, number 5, this project is one of the most profoundly important to California and Californians, especially those Californians who have not benefited by other previous initiatives and who still lack access to even basic broadband. As a committee, as legislators and in the administration, your leadership has been commendable. There's not a day that goes by when I don't receive an inquiry from another state about the legislation or about our progress to date. So I have to say that the rest of the country is following your leadership with deep interest. We're also fortunate to be working with such visionary leaders as Director Tong and Deputy Director Scott Adams and their teams. They've convened an unusually heterogeneous set of state partners and have been working assiduously to get us all on the same page, which is no small task, as each office is deeply committed to this endeavor, but each sees it from its own professional point of view. I'd like to turn now to the third-party administrator's president and chief operating officer and my colleague, Tony Naughton, to provide a sketch of progress to date.
Thanks very much, Louis. The third-party administrator has essentially wrapped up the integration aspects of the introductory phase of this very large program. And in its role of providing leadership for the Broadband for All program, as well as overseeing the development of the middle mile infrastructure and then operating that infrastructure, we've immersed ourselves in the necessary processes and working relationships with all of the agency partners involved. And we will continue to do that throughout this large long-term effort. With regard to data and mapping, the third-party administrator has developed a framework for data and map sharing amongst interagency partners and the TPA as well, including the integration and securing of this information in a data repository operated by the California Department of Technology. And I know Isaac Cabrera will be speaking more about that in a little bit. This framework is a key living process under which the TPA and agency partners bring relevant maps and data that is able to be shared to enable us to determine where unserved and underserved communities are, which is one of the most very critical aspects of turning the goals of SB 156 into reality. These determinations will be the basis of the decision-making process that will be applied by CDT and the TPA with input from agency partners ongoing as to where the middle mile infrastructure should be developed in order to connect broadband services in unserved and underserved last mile locales to the rest of the global internet once those locales are connectable or are newly built. As to design and engineering, the TPA has been working closely with CDT, Caltrans as well to create the infrastructure development specs for fiber builds, as well as specifications for the use of dark fiber and other modes of connectivity in the middle mile network that may be used. The processes and requirements for building fiber routes on Caltrans right-of-way are important. They are understandably time-consuming and involve a considerable amount of budget work, refinement of specifications per site, as well as logistical planning. Turning to the development of a business and economic model, and we've been working very closely both with Mark Monroe and Scott Adams on this. The third-party administrator is working with CDT and Department of Finance on the development of this model. It's critical. The middle mile is being developed with a view to very long-term, more or less permanent operation, if you will. And it must therefore be based on economics and a business operating model that is very sustainable for the duration. Public funds for the development of middle mile infrastructure must be used wisely, and it's important that the service fees collected for open access to the middle mile infrastructure are sufficient to fund the ongoing long-term operating and maintenance requirements of this network, and to do so for a very long time. We are mindful of the potential of supply chain shortages. We've all been reading about those in the news and various places, and largely as a result of the global pandemic that's been going on for some time now. We're very mindful of these shortages, and in particular for things such as optical fiber plant and processing chipsets, two critical items in the development of new networks. We've begun to discuss ways to address these shortages so that they have a minimal impact on development of the middle mile network, and we can at least avoid or minimize delays whenever possible. I want to now speak a little bit about pilot projects and recommendations for those pilot projects. As Scott mentioned, we have some pilot projects on the table, if you will. From very early on in this program, the TPA has recommended the creation of pilot sites. These are early sites for the middle mile network, which are intended to allow us to create and refine processes, do a lot of learning related to the development of the middle mile infrastructure, while at the same time creating those early pieces of infrastructure that can provide production class middle mile services at a very early stage of this program. It's been widely agreed by other agency partners as to the logic, that this is a logical approach, if you will, to getting underway with this program. We all want to learn, refine, and optimize the approach we take to creating and operating the middle mile infrastructure for the duration. The TPA and the CPUC have both developed lists of potential pilot project locations for the development of middle mile infrastructure. The TPA has reviewed all of these and is now, in just over 6 weeks from the commencement of this overall effort, we've recommended to CDT that we begin to pursue all of these locations, which I believe are 15 in number, as early pilot project sites for middle mile network development. The TPA and CDT are about to start work on the specifics of a pilot phase plan, which will be developed over the next 30 days for immediate execution. And there's much work to be done here, but the TPA and our interagency partners are maintaining a strong sense of urgency about making real progress towards results, not only for the early pilot sites that have been recommended, but also for all the middle mile locations that will be built in the years ahead. Now, I'm not sure, Director Tong, if you want me to take questions now or if we hold those off until later.
Let's go ahead and just take a pause and open it up to the advisory committee to see if any questions specifically on this. Thank you, Tony. Advisory committee members, any questions? All right, I'm seeing none at the moment. We'll go ahead and keep moving on the next update, and there's always going to be items that, I shouldn't say items, time is going to be allotted at the end of all of these information items to open back up to the committee members. Just a quick reminder for our audience who are participating, if you like to make a public comment, there is a public comment method that you submit a request over the email. Because the chat is being disabled on this meeting to allow a concentration on the presentation. Just want to remind folks of that procedure. Thank you. All right, let's move, Scott. Let's go ahead and call the next presenter.
Yeah, thank you, Director Tong. Isaac Cabrera, our State Geographic Information Officer. Can you give us an update on the data and mapping effort?
Yes. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, and good afternoon, committee members. So the data, break it up into the last 30 days and the next 30 days. And for data inventory, what we did is we worked with our partners, the CPUC, Caltrans, and the TPA to complete an inventory of all partner data that will help evaluate and select the middle mile broadband locations. In regards to data sharing, we created a centralized data repository using an ArcGIS online mapping platform. Moving on to the next 30 days, starting with the first bullet, we're going about formatting the data and making it consistent across partners and agencies so that it can be easily compared and analyzed. That encompasses both that first bullet and the second bullet. Creating a foundational map and application, we're working to create an innovative mapping application that will help in the selection of the middle mile broadband locations themselves. And in integrating the CPUC public comment, we'll be working directly with CPUC to incorporate all public comment data and ensure that the public comments will be of the highest impact. And the last bullet, creating internal and external dashboards. We'll be creating internal / public dashboards that will allow staff and the public to search and filter the data related to the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. Oh, sorry, Director Tong. Thanks, Isaac. We know it's a big project, and you've literally been working around the clock with partners on that. And appreciate you being willing to be pushed out here in front of the committee to speak out to that. So for the next, would like to call on my esteemed colleague, Rob Osborne at the Public Utilities Commission. Rob's going to do 2 updates, first on the middle mile public comment process, and then on the last mile programs. Rob?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Director Tong. So the purpose of this slide really, and I apologize, there's a lot of words, it's really to provide some background to the middle mile comment process. So SB 156 amended the government code to require the PUC to solicit and receive public comments within 90 days of the signing of the bill, and had 2 general areas of inquiry, which are part of the broadband deployment proceeding under Commissioner Guzman-Aceves. So the A and the B essentially relate to 2 rulings that were issued. First, and this was in ruling 1, we asked parties to comment on the current locations, routes, availability, technical performance characteristics, and other aspects of commercial sources of supply of middle mile broadband network services. So that's looking at existing services. The second ruling, which is B, in this, we asked parties to comment on the technical performance characteristics, network design, and other design, technical, business, and operational issues that would increase the attractiveness of the statewide open access middle mile broadband network for commercial internet service providers. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown of the two rulings. So ruling 1 was issued at the beginning of August, and opening comments were filed by parties.
Hey, Director Osborne, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if some noise came up with but the voice of your microphone went very soft.
Oh, okay. I'll try and go a little closer, maybe.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So ruling 1 was issued at the beginning of August, and opening comments were filed by parties on September 3rd. Reply comments were filed on September 21st. We had more than 50 different organizations file formal opening comments and or reply comments on middle mile deployment, locations, priority areas, and other issues. So PUC staff will be providing the public feedback to the California Department of Technology, and comments are available on the docket's webpage on the CPUC website. And there's links here on the slides for that. Next slide, please. So ruling 2 was focused on network characteristics. Party comments were submitted on October 1st and reply comments on October 15th. We had more than 30 organizations submit opening comments. And there's a link here on the slides to the docket card, as well as a link to the informal comments that were filed. And we also have a link to the middle mile locations implementation website. Now, if we switch to the last mile funding, that's the next slide, please. So this slide addresses 2 of the 3 last mile funding mechanisms that were approved in SB 156. And those are the Technical Assistance and Loan Loss Reserve, which are being addressed in the California Advanced Services Fund proceeding, which is led by Commissioner Houck. The PUC issued a staff proposal on technical assistance and solicited comments through a scoping memo issued on September 16th. The reply comments were due on October 14th. PUC is in the process of reviewing those comments, opening and reply comments, and will begin working on a proposed decision to implement the local agency assistance program. And the next slide, we show that a rough timeline. So we see here the staff proposal for local and tribal technical assistance concurrent with the scoping memo. Comments were due the 30th on the staff proposal, reply comments on the 14th, and we're aiming to have a decision on or before December 1st on the local technical assistance. And then for the loan loss reserve program, which is the second of the 3 that I mentioned, which is being handled in this proceeding, we're shooting for the first quarter of 2022. Next slide, please. So this slide addresses the 3rd of the 3 last mile funding mechanisms, the federal funding account. And this is being addressed in Commissioner Guzman Aceves' broadband deployment proceeding. So there was a ruling that went out on September 23rd and requested feedback on a staff proposal to implement last mile federal funding account. The opening comments are due October 29th, so that's next week, and reply comments are due by November 15th. The scoping memo timeline estimates issuing a proposed decision to implement the federal funding account in between December and March. So December this year, March early next year. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rob and Director Osborne. I wanted to take a pause here before our final update from Caltra, just to open it up to the committee member to see if any questions or comment on CPUCs, as well as earlier the data mapping update. Yes, Ms. Miller.
Mr. Osborne, do you mind going back to the timing slide? The 2 slides ago, I think. Certainly. Oh, right there.
Yes.
So when would you expect that not for last mile, I'm sorry, for middle mile? Did you do a timing slide for middle mile? Did I miss it?
So the middle mile comments, we've already collected opening comments for both rulings and reply comments, I believe we've also received. So we're in the process now of summarizing all of those.
Got it. Okay, so you are in the summary stage of that. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was my follow-up question. Thank you very much. And when do you expect to then be in the summary stage for the last mile?
So last mile follows this timeline that I show on this slide here. So the first of the 3, we expect to, so we're integrating the comments into, incorporating those into the staff proposal that would lead to a proposed decision on or before December 1st. So that would address the local technical assistance. The loan loss reserve won't be happening until the first quarter of next year. So we haven't issued a staff proposal on that yet, but that will be forthcoming. And then for the federal funding account, which is the third of the three that I mentioned earlier, we have not yet received opening comments. So those will begin coming in, well, they're due on the 29th, so the end of this month, for opening comments and reply comments the 15th of November. So that's still in process.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. All right, let's move to Caltra. Scott?
Yeah, Elizabeth Dewar, the broadband coordinator for Caltrans. Could you please provide an update on your work?
Great. Thank you, Scott and Director Tong, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to be here today to provide you with a brief update. Caltrans is continuing to work and coordinate with CDT, the third-party administrator, and the CPUC on the locations and priorities of the Middle Mile Network. And we do look forward to continuing working with Mark Monroe and his new effort. So welcome, Mark, and welcome to our new team members at Silicon Valley Consulting Group. The Caltrans Broadband Program has been meeting with our 12 districts and has completed all of those outreach meetings to discuss the delivery of the broadband projects and looking at leveraging our transportation projects that overlap the Middle Mile Network, as well as planning the new standalone broadband projects. We've also identified these potentially viable transportation projects throughout the state in which we can include the scope of the broadband Middle Mile Network work. And we've started proposing broadband projects in which we can design and construct. And lastly, within the last 30 days, earlier this month, Caltrans hosted an outreach meeting with internet service providers and stakeholders to have discussions on facilitating broadband infrastructure deployment on the state highway right-of-way. We were honored to have CalSTA's Deputy Secretary for Innovative Mobility Solutions, Ms. Pepper, and our Caltrans Chief Deputy Director, Mr. Keever, as well as the President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund, Ms. Wright McPeak, share some opening remarks at that meeting. We were fortunate to have CDT's Director Tong and Deputy Director Adams, as well as CPUC's Communications Director, Rob Osborne, join us to talk about SB 156 and the efforts that we have ongoing with the Broadband Middle Mile Network Initiative. We appreciated the broadband service providers as well as stakeholders that take their time to participate in this meeting and engage with us and provide their input. So our thanks to them as well. And finally, I wanted to share that within Caltrans and throughout our districts, each district is appointing a dedicated broadband Middle Mile Network contact to lead the project delivery effort and report progress on our broadband Middle Mile Network efforts. So thank you, Scott and Director Tong.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Good work. And it's going to, obviously for all of us, going to be ramping up even more in the coming months and years to deliver this project on time. Director Tong, I would hand it back to you now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dora, for that update. And we can go ahead and unshare the slide. I do wanted to open it up to the committee members for any comments or questions while that we are ready to open up to the public comments after the committee members. Just a little bit of refresher for those of you, especially for those of you who are joining this first time. When the public comment opens, we do have up to 30 minutes. Each individual speaker has 2 minutes, and we will have Jewel to also talk through those procedure. If you have not sent an email to request a public comment period, you could also raise your hand using the Zoom function, and then our moderator will be able to call you to make the public comments. Just a clarification, this would be a public comments, not in a Q&A session. those can be follow up via the public communication channel afterward, which Joe's gonna talk about more. So with that, I wanna come back to open it up for the committee members to see if there's any questions or comment for staff. Yes, Director.
Yes, Director Tong, thanks for the leadership and coordination that you continue to provide for this committee. We're at Caltrans, we're excited about the potential that this carries. We know that the coordination with PUC and CDT is going to be key to getting there. A lot of people are expecting and hoping that projects happen like sometime tomorrow, but there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to happen. I'm particularly excited because of the resources that we finally have now to get there, and the federal funds, the state dollars that we have to get to deliver. It's going to make a big difference. We're at Caltrans, that's what we're known for delivering infrastructure. So as the coordination happens, as the resources come into place, I think we'll be able, I know we'll be able to deliver for you all on this committee and the people listening and the state at large. So look forward to that. And thanks to Elizabeth and Janice for all the coordination work they're doing with the third-party administrator and all the other partners as well. So look forward to it. And by the way, congratulations to Mark as well in his new role. Kudos.
Thank you, Director Amisakin. Any other comments or questions from staff?
Director Tong?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, no worries. I meant to comment earlier, and I hope especially Senator Gonzalez and Ms. Quirk Silva, if I think those are two legislative members, but the idea of these pilot projects that Mr. Naughton spoke to, I think are really important. We've spoken about it a fair amount, and we've been working obviously hand in glove with the PUC, and the benefit of these projects, I think, and I just want to make sure you're really aware of where they are and how helpful they'll be, is they really are for us to see kind of the costs and to get going right away, and really acting that as we build this network in the state, making sure that we know the greatest needs and can serve the greatest number of people. So I thought it was just a really important point. Mr. Naughton did a great job, who I'm not seeing on the line, describing it. Mr. Fox is here to answer any other questions, as is the commissioner. And I think it's just this incredible opportunity for us to really prove that what the state is doing. And I'm just making sure you're all really aware of that as we go through the rest of the process that the team has described to you today. So we are kind of on these two tracks to get started right away doing these pilot projects in these 9 locations, and then also moving forward with the public process through the PUC, and then on our mapping and making sure that you all know where each area will be served. So I think that was just an important point, and I thought maybe it would be helpful to call it to everyone's attention and see if there's any questions specifically, and if we can answer anything or follow up even in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Assembly Member Quirk-Silva, it sounds like you have unmute. Would you like to?
Yeah, hang on. Okay.
Oh, you're in the car. Hopefully.
Sorry, I'm in the car. I'm trying to do like 2 things at once, which I know I shouldn't be doing, but this is the first, I wasn't doing this while I was driving. I just pulled into a parking space. But yeah, I want to thank all of you. I'm really impressed just from now to the last meeting, all of the progress, to welcome Mark aboard. But I also did have a question on the pilot projects, and you might have mentioned it in the presentation and I just missed it, but how were the 15 projects chosen, and how will we be able to understand where those will be? So that's one question. And then the second question is, you mentioned that there were about 50 partners that had a chance to participate in the public outreach. And again, at some point, will we be able to know not necessarily who the 50 are, but how others can get notified about these meetings and so forth? Because it is a little bit of an in-house A lot of you know each other. Some people know that there's some of the legislators that are part of this committee, but I'm just not sure how many other people know about this.
Good question. I want to see if the staff wants to chime in first.
Yeah, this is Scott. On the first question on the pilot projects, the third-party administrator, given the size and scale and urgency of the project, has made recommendations that all of the 15 proposed sites that were suggested by a PUC, by Caltrans, and by the third-party administrator, that if possible, we proceed with those. Still, there's a part of the process that we're going through, as as Gail Miller had recommended, that we want to make sure that any pilot that is selected is consistent with input from the PUC public comment process, and that there is a last mile tie. So the recommendation is to move forward with those pilots, but a final decision has not been made on what those pilots were. So that's that process. And then Assembly Member Quirt Silva, I think on your second question, Rob Osborne from PUC could answer on, who of the 50 organizations had made public comment. And Rob, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, certainly. So we will be publishing the comment summary that will show all the organizations that commented. So you'll be able to see the 50 that did comment in the first ruling and the 30 that did in the second. And in those comments, we did get feedback on specific road segments and areas that the commenters thought were a priority. So we've matched those against the pilot project locations as well. And in terms of how to continue participating or how to expand participation, we can still take informal comments even though the public comment period is ended. So I certainly, if you'd like, I can reach out to you, or we can find a way to connect you to that process. And I think, I don't know, Commissioner Guzman-Aceves, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, I just wanted to share, and I know Assemblywoman, you had already reached out and we've been playing a little phone tag. So I think there's still going to be a continued need really for having public engagement. I think this particular forum is an excellent venue as well, because our role really is going to be really getting these front end priorities and the need across the state. And how we continue to keep that public engagement is a great question that I think we should continue to think about. The one thing I would say is in the last mile funding, which I think is often, and not to overgeneralize, but oftentimes when we talk to communities, they're really focused on that piece. And I definitely would love to work with you and all the members on a more expanded community engagement, and making sure that folks know that not just, and thank you again for the extension of the CSF program, but we have both the last mile funding and the CSF now that's available for these projects. And so I would also concurrently to public input on this process is really expand our efforts on the last mile.
Now, where'd I go? Okay, thank you. I'm not sure I'm where I went. There I am. Oh, well, speaking of technology, I'm usually not this bad at it, but I would just say again, from some of my opening comments of some of the beginning meetings, I'm always going to be thinking about the very small organizations that may not be directly affiliated with even a school district, a city, a county, but they are out there. We know that many of our community centers, nonprofits, that a lot of them were actually, in fact, hosting students to do much of the schooling last year, because the individual home sites, a lot of the students would go to the local boys and girls clubs community centers, and those partnerships are continuing. So that's just the smaller groups that don't always have the bigger access is just if we can make note that any way to let them know about what's going on, I think would be a great step. But I appreciate all you're doing. Thank you so much. I have to jump off too. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Assemblymember. I want to see if there's any other questions or comment from the committee member. I do have one more. Yes, Senator Gonzalez, go for it.
I just wanted to lend my comments. This is, a handful of meetings that we've had so far, so good. And I will concur with my Assembly colleague that it seems everyone is very much invested in seeing this obviously move through, but you've done it in such an expedient way. In these 90 days so far, we are in a very, very good place. So going back to my communities, in fact, I have a community meeting tonight in which we're talking about this issue back home in Long Beach. And it's just really great to see all of our agencies working so cohesively together. I'm inviting quite a few people to these meetings just so they can stay plugged in. So any additional to Commissioner Guzman Aceves's point, additional expanded marketing that we can do even in different languages to be able to engage other folks would be phenomenal. So to that, kudos to everyone, and thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you, Senator Gonzalez. Any other questions or comments?
Just ditto Senator Gonzalez's comments.
Thank you, Secretary. All right, I think maybe I'll pile it on a little bit. Just really, really good work by the staff, and just a great collaboration. Nothing is ever easy, especially in what we call the startup mode. But everybody was just a common vision, common goal, and I think that's what enabled this rapid progress. At the same time, very, very mindful, and I'm glad, Senator Gonzalez, that you're also hosting community meetings, and if the Assembly member or anybody else, that there has been a lot of public speaking engagement to this group. And those are great opportunities and venues to get the word out. And I'm hearing CPUC also continue to, Commissioner Guzman also looking at, perhaps an expanded public comment period. I think having that level of input from the public to really help drive and steer where these locations need to be, it's a very, very important process. Having that said, concur with what Ms. Miller was mentioning, that starting with the pilot site really is gonna be able to test out a lot of our understanding and with how the theory meets reality. I think that's the goal here. And then by going through that pilot, it's a good learning on how do we continue to refine the process when it comes to a much bigger statewide expansion and acceleration. So what I'm hearing, and Scott and team, is that at the upcoming November meeting, there will be a lot more information and detail that will be shared. And then prior to that, there will be a good, a communication feedback loop that should go into as much as we can, so that at the November meeting, maybe this is my call out, don't miss the November meeting. The November meeting would be a good forum to, openly share with a lot of those almost fully baked recommendations.
Yep.
Okay, looking forward to that. Okay, look at the time. It's almost like right on the dot, 2:01. So with that, Jewel, I'll hand it over to you to go ahead and talk about the public comment process, and then we'll go right into it.
Sure, and before we start that, we did want to remind everybody that we will post the slides in the video. What we'll do is we'll try to get the slides up as soon as possible because they have those links in that Director Osborne talked about. So we are going to get everything up. And then just some reminders with public comments. It is limited to 2 minutes per commenter, 1 commenter per entity, and it should address the work discussed during the meeting. Public comments really shouldn't be questions. If you do have questions, please direct them to the email account on the website. It positions us to make sure we get you accurate information, and we'll start developing a list of frequently asked questions so that people can reference that. And you can always, as Director Tong mentioned earlier, submit public comments through the online public comment form. What I'm going to do is we did get a couple people requesting public comments from email. So how we'll start is the ones I received through email, then we'll go to phone, and then we'll go to people raising their hand on Zoom. If you can't see your electronic hand, please feel free to wave your physical hand. So for public comment online, is Kareem Weaver here?
Yes, I am.
Hi, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Kareem Weaver, and I'm representing the NAACP, our Oakland branch, and also the state of California on the Education Committee, but specifically the Oakland branch for this item. I've heard a lot about equity through this work, and what we've heard so far. I heard Mark Monroe say the goal was to bring broadband access to communities equitably. I heard Jay Sharma talk about the diversity of his team, and Lewis said that this is the most comprehensive statewide equity project. And even heard Tony say that underserved or unserved communities will be the determining factor in kind of where we lay the broadband. But there is a disconnect, and I want to bring this up because I don't think it's too late for us to make a shift. There's a disconnect between our audio and our video here. And very quickly, if you allow me, in the Oakland region, we have two main freeways. 880, which is a lower working class and a Black and Latino area. And then we have 580 and 13, which is the more affluent area. By law, big trucks can't go on 880, by law. And so they come up from the Oakland port and they go to wherever they're going, but they travel on 880. They travel to the working class neighborhood. This is this, if you juxtapose that and the path that those trucks have to travel, it's almost as if the middle mile or the initiatives that we're talking about here are likewise can be imposed on that or superimposed. We don't want the areas, or I should say this, we want the areas that have been the least served and legally, unfortunately, have been set upon, not by the folks here, but haven't had the advantage of protections of law to actually have access to broadband, both in terms of economic development, in terms of socioeconomic support, et cetera, business opportunities. But we're making the same mistake again, meaning we're planning to put it on the 580, which is what I've seen in the drawings. In the same way, by law, those trucks can't travel on 880. So they get the asthma, but they don't get the internet. I don't want to double down. The NAACP considers this a civil rights issue. And I know we got to go fast. I heard people say that, everyone's getting kudos for going fast, but sometimes the equitable move, the move for social justice, is not the most convenient thing to do. You got to slow down and say, wait a second, we can't, by omission or by mistake or by oversight, compound past mistakes and injustices. So the NAACP is willing to re-engage with the commissioners and those involved to really look at the map and how it can be done most equitably, or the laying of the broadband, both the middle mile and the final mile. But we urge you to reconsider the footprint and consider putting those cables down 880 as opposed to just the 580 freeway. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I know this isn't a Q&A and I don't want to respond to every comment, but I did want to clarify that no decisions have been made, Mr. Weaver. So this feedback is actually super helpful. And to the extent you can actually send your comments into the Public Utilities Commission, I think that could be incredibly helpful. So I'm going to give you, Rob, I hope you won't hurt me.
We do have his comments, Gail.
Oh, perfect. Oh, you do. Great. Okay.
We sat down.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner. I just don't want there to be any confusion on that point. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. And I think I want to appreciate the level of organization that the NAACP has brought to this, because it's very difficult sometimes when we're dealing with GIS maps and opportunities for builds based on our construction work through Caltrans and all the other variables that the legislature directs us to look at, and really step back and look at the end result. So these are the types of public comments that are the most important. And thank you for taking more time to be with us today, Mr. Weaver. And we're very excited by your comments.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. All right, Jill.
I think the next online public comment we have is from Elizabeth. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name. From California Cable and Telecommunications Association.
Oh, yes, sorry, I actually just submitted it. I had a question of if the locations were going to be made public, but I know you guys already clarified that answer, so thank you.
All right.
Then the next would be Joel Pena.
Yes, thank you. My name is Joel Pena. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships with Tech Exchange. And over the course of the pandemic, we distributed over 30,000 devices with hotspots. That being said, I did want to follow what Mr. Weaver was stating in regards to accessibility to the communities in the flatland. And to quote Sonny McPeak, who was mentioned in the presentation, we can't hotspot our way out of the digital divide. So I'm here in support of providing access to the families in the flatlands, and to just piggyback what Mr. Weaver eloquently stated in regards to equity, to lead with equity, and to make certain that we're serving our students and families that desperately need the help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Jules?
Let's go to anybody who is on the phone who would have a public comment. If you're on the phone, if you could unmute yourself if you have a public comment. We can loop back to phone just in case afterwards. Right now we have some people with raised hands. Jorge Pacheco.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jorge Pacheco, Jr. From Santa Clara County. I'm also a trustee for the Oak Grove School District, a teacher for the last 8 years, and now a digital equity specialist for Community Health Partnership. I wanted to say 3 things. The first is I wanted to be really specific and saying that we want to make sure that fiber highway segments that run from San Jose to Gilroy, Gilroy to Hollister, and from San Jose to Santa Cruz are there. And we are looking at the broadband maps that we've been given, looking at it really closely, and we're hoping that the CDT, the CPUC, everybody is going to be as consulting with us, local agencies on those maps, to making sure that whatever communities that don't have needs, whose needs aren't being met, are met. And so, and I want to especially shout out our open space authorities who have jurisdictions over native lands. You've been, all of you collectively have been doing incredible work with our native communities. I myself am indigenous. So I really want to continue to impress upon that importance. And the second thing I'd like to say is the importance of tariffs. Tariffs really are a way to protect consumers from unjust and discriminatory rates that disproportionately impact low-income, Black, Latino, Native, and rural communities. And so as long as tariffs are a strategy and moving forward with a middle mile, that would be fantastic. And the last thing is, I had the pleasure of engaging in a really powerful webinar, the CCALAC Policy Cafe, that featured 2 of your members, Commissioner Marta Guzman Aceves and Senator Lena Gonzalez. It was absolutely amazing. And I feel really, really humbled and proud to know that these 2 powerful Latinas are leading our broadband digital equity work. And just know that us in Santa Clara County at the Community Health Partnership are deeply indebted to you and your service for all these years. And thank you for your service moving forward.
Lauren Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Committee members, staff, collaborative partners. Thank you for your hard work and dedication to getting this right for the state, especially considering all the different needs, geographies, et cetera. My name is Lauren Taylor. I am City Council member for the City of Oakland, and I am calling to lend my voice to those that you've already heard, addressing how we target middle mile infrastructure investments towards the areas of greatest need. And as was mentioned earlier, we see that what has been proposed, or at least the initial map, is focusing in an area that where you have less population and more affluent, as opposed to targeting into those areas of our city, Oakland, where there is.
All right, Mr. Taylor, I'm gonna. It was not gonna Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So basically making sure that we are focusing on those areas that have the greatest need, where we've got challenges, gaps in adoption, affordability, institutionalized racism, like redlining that has impacted those communities. They're the ones that need this extension, this investment so much more. And so I advocate for re-examining the map and looking at the 880 as the pathway for this middle mile infrastructure, the middle mile fiber. This same recommendation was included in the joint opening comments of the Oakland Undivided Coalition, as well as the Greenlining Institute, as well as several others that I know who have submitted comments as well. So thank you for your attention to that. And I'm heartened to hear about the interest from the committee to explore and make sure that we're getting this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Patrick, can you please pronounce your last name so we know if you're willing to?
Yes, it's Messick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time, and thank you for creating this space to hear community voice. Today, I'm reaching out to you as an educator of 10 years, having worked exclusively in Title I schools in California. In my 10 years of education, I can tell you that broadband internet access went from a nice to have to an absolute necessity for a 21st century education. We saw that, of course, in distance learning when students simply could not access their education without adequate internet access. But we see it now even in the return in trying to make up the remarkable learning loss that has occurred over these last 2 years. I would ask you to consider if for your kids and for their education, if 25/3 would be an acceptable standard. Would that give them access to personalized online learning platforms, to the full capacity of the digital world? Would that enable families to apply for social benefit, to telebank, to visit their doctor? If 25/3 is not an adequate standard for your family, then I do not think that we should accept it as an acceptable standard for families in historically marginalized communities. Here in Oakland, we have 90,000 residents without access to telelearning, concentrated in the Oakland flatlands. When we think about the metric of affordability, we can't just consider the overall cost. We have to weight it with the underlying social stress that households face. And I can tell you, as Mr. Weaver so eloquently stated, the families in our flatlands on average live 7 years less because of their exposure to pollutants, in part because of the ways that highways were installed. So when I heard that Middle Mile was going to prioritize and only be built along state highways, this seems like an incredible moment in civil rights history, where the development of the interstate highway system, which decimated Black communities, can now be used as a vehicle of opportunity. And I implore you, as you decide where you're going to lay this middle mile fiber, to look at the communities most marginalized and the communities for whom proximity to this middle mile fiber will lead to innovative public-private partnerships and ubiquitous internet for families who are long overdue their public investment. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to continued collaboration, not just for Oakland, but for areas across the state so deserving of this investment. Thank you.
The next person, it says Wilson 5 on your screen.
Hi, yes, this is Larry Ortega, and I'm with an organization called Community Union. Our organization has been doing training since 1993. So we've been working in the digital divide before it was even called that. We have over 35,000 people that have graduated from our training programs, mostly Spanish-speaking individuals living in low-income communities, to the extent that we've been featured in television, garnering over 30 million views on the work that we've done in terms of helping community adopt the technology. We've done this all the way from Silicon Valley into the Central Valley and down into Southern California. I'm super excited that this committee even exists and that it creates a forum that we are able to offer public comment to and help direct this gigantic project. And I wanted to say that I submitted 9 questions via the email. I'm not sure if those got picked up, but those were questions that hopefully I understand now that they'll be emailed back to me in response. So that's great. That's sufficient. We don't need to address those right now. The comments that I have are as follows regarding the comments that were made earlier on the Silicon Valley consortia, the micro business. I would be interested to know if they have experience actually closing the rural divide and what that experience is, if they can actually cite that experience and where they've done that. And also their work in the inner cities. I heard, kind of broadly the work that they've done, but I'm not sure if they have actually worked in the inner city, like connecting MacArthur Park area or Leimert Park areas in the city of Los Angeles. That's very dense, big apartment buildings, et cetera. Wondering how they've done that and it could offer some light as it relates to that. Also, regarding the maps, Pomona, where I live and who I'm representing in this effort here, shows there's only 795 unserved, according to the CPUC map. We know from the pandemic last year, there were at least 10,000 kids that were unable to connect consistently due to service issues. So I don't know how we get about reconciling that issue, but I would like to see if we can get a specific answer on that. And then relating to the current projects, I heard the comment about the Silicon Valley Consortium being very immersed in these projects. We would like to know who the representative is that is speaking to Pomona in Southern California or representing Los Angeles County. So if we can get that, that would be very helpful. And then I heard, and I may have misheard this, so I just want a point of clarification, that I believe, again, it was the Silicon Valley Consortia that was stating that there was a presumptive effort to connect to a mobile network. And this concerns me greatly because we know that 5G is 10,000 times slower than fiber optics. And if we're intent on trying to deliver a mobile network in replacement of a world-class telecommunication infrastructure, which includes fiber optics, I take great exception to that. And we need to kind of figure out how we're going to map out the fiber optic deployment and where it's going to be mapped out into, where's the dark fiber, how do we connect that to the homes, and where the intersection is planned of the broadband delivery, the middle mile delivery, how that's going to intersect with the, how do we get that connected to Pomona? So those are some concerns that I have.
We're coming up on time and we do have some other raised hands.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lily Gangas.
Hi, can you hear me? There we go.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. My name is Lily Gangas. I'm the Chief Technology Community Officer of the Caper Center. We're actually an operating foundation at the intersection of technology, racial justice, providing research, thought leadership, programs, as well as other strategic partnerships and investments specifically to increase the representation of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities across the tech ecosystem that we are so underrepresented. And this entails looking at it at a systems level from K through 12 education to entrepreneurship and venture capital. I'm specifically here in order to support the prioritization of re-looking at where the maps are at and making sure that specifically for Oakland, where I've been working with the Oakland Undivided team as well to make sure that we're prioritizing the new fiber being built around I-880. As you've heard from many of the folks that have been on the line, I think it's super critical to make sure that the areas that have been overlooked generations after generations and have been disproportionately impacted because of the digital redlining, that doesn't get repeated again. We are really at a moment in our generation where we have to make sure that we're not just trying to continue, as somebody shared, we're done with hotspotting our way out of this. And as somebody who's been working in technology, and I started my career in technology, I have already seen a lot of public networks. I've had access to different Wi-Fi when I was a student 20 years ago in LA. And then the fact that here in Oakland, I'm still seeing students and families disconnected when we're like less than 12 miles away from the heart of Silicon Valley, where trillions of dollars are invested towards technology, is simply wrong. And so I want to make sure that we are looking at how to make sure that we build this right and do it right for the next generation. We can't afford as a city, as a region, and also as a state to continue to have the disproportional participation of communities of color into the tech jobs to get into computer science classes. But without access to high-speed broadband, it won't be possible. And so I want to make sure that we are prioritizing these maps and making sure that they're not overlooking the communities that need it the most. And so I hope that you can reconsider the maps and also look at the opportunities for new job creation in these flat areas that, again, continuously get out. We've seen the data of potential redlining, and we've seen the impact of many years. And as myself, in my personal time, I'm also the Oakland Redistricting Commission chair. And so I'm committed personally and professionally to make sure that we don't do the mistakes of the past. So I urge you to please get it right to this time, because this is the only chance we have for the next generation to come. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Stan Santos.
Okay, so I submitted a proposal, I guess it was to the PUC in the proceeding, and I just wanted to make sure that that was the correct process, or that it would be considered with it was CWA, but it was also resolutions from several small city councils in a rural area of the Central Valley, and those communities feel like, they've seen it happen again and again and again, and they don't have a lot of faith in the system, and so they're concerned that they will be bypassed again. This middle mile network comes to within a certain distance from them. It wouldn't be an unreasonable distance to travel to add some fiber to include those communities, which together amount to over 27,000 in population. So we would hope that would be considered. I've directed some questions to PUC staff about the mapping, because when I go into the middle mile map where it shows the proposed lines, and I click on certain of these communities, it's like the gentleman from Pomona said, you click on it and you get, 11 households that are underserved, or 80 households that are underserved. And I guess the evidence on the ground is significantly different. So I've asked what the source of that data is, and that's what I'm still waiting for an answer on that from PUC staff. I actually emailed some of the staff that's in charge of the mapping, or whose name is on the mapping, as to the source of the data. So we're still concerned about that and would like to see that. And then at some point, like to know what the process is, so that we get an acknowledgement of our proposal, or get some kind of roadmap so we'll know what to do next. And that'll be all. I'm sure we'll have opportunities to follow up, and I really salute your efforts on this, and this is a historic moment. So we don't want to get bypassed. That's all we're saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're not seeing any hands up currently. We do want to take one swing back at people on the phone, if anybody on the phone would like to provide public comment. I think we can take the silence as a no.
All right. Thank you, Jules. And thank you for all of the speakers that were utilizing the public comment to give a valuable feedback as the state and our partners continue to going down this journey. As many of the committee members have mentioned, that these feedback are tremendously helpful. So whether they're going to CPUC and use this as an additional opportunity to have your voices heard, we welcome those inputs. So thank you so much for taking the time. With that said, we are at the end of our meeting. I want to go ahead and move forward and close the public comment and give a final opportunity for the committee members to see if anybody have any comments or feedback they want to say publicly. Oh. Yes.
Director Tong, I wanted to maybe encourage any of the public commenters who have any questions for us to feel free to reach out to my office directly, and you can locate me on the website, because I know this is a very new process, and you make comments and you're not always responded to immediately. Unfortunately, that's not how our process works, but we are most definitely listening and always welcome to meet with you. Fortunately, this is a quasi-legislative proceeding and we don't have the ex parte limitations. But just on the data question, I wanted to acknowledge that the maps don't fully represent the reality. And that's been a constant limitation of the data because we depend on self-reported data, which we buffer and augment, self-reported by the providers to us and the FCC. And Rob, you can elaborate on this, but we do augment that with the CalSpeed information that allows for every resident to really make that information more robust. But nonetheless, from our perspective, even if it's 795 versus 10,000, it's still 795. So don't feel like the density is any less of an important factor for us. So I would just also wanted to reiterate that your engagement is very important, not just for the middle mile, but for the last mile. And I just, as we were speaking, sending out a couple of thoughts to our staff on engaging some of you on your particular areas for those types of projects. So keep that in mind as you continue your advocacy. And also just one other highlight I'll say on the federal rules for this funding, we have to use this on fiber. So this is not, I think, the concern that there would be certainly for the middle mile and also that would apply to the last mile. So hopefully that answers a couple of questions, but this is a time for direct engagement and we're most certainly open to that.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I would also add on that not only this is a platform for the comments to come in addition to the CPUC proceeding on both the middle mile as well as last mile. Next week, actually on the 27th, there is a California Broadband Council meeting that is minimum 3 times a year, but possibly next year we go to 4. We'll see if we can get the adoption by the council member, but that's an opportunity to focus on or provide comments on not only a middle mile, last mile, but as many of you has alluded to on the adoption, the training, as well as the affordability, which was all being reflected as part of the California Broadband Action Plan and pursuing to the governor's executive order to have broadband for all. So all of your feedback are very much valued. And it's hitting right, on target in terms of the middle mile initiative. It's part of it, but there are many work ahead. And so if you don't have that information already, the California Broadband Council meeting, it's on the 27th. That information can also be found on the California Broadband Council website. All right, with that said, right at 2:30, once again, thank you so much for all of the engagement from our public, and special thanks for all of the advisory committee member for your continued support and guidance on this. As I mentioned, sounds like the November meeting with even more information to be presented. And thank you so much and taking this part of this process. With that, meeting adjourned.